when you go into the boardroom every quarter and they ask you, did we have a good quarter? And you say yes, and they say, how do you know? I'm like, what's your answer? Like, what do you measure at Adobe that suggests that things are going well? And she says, it's the simplest three things. It's impressions, engagement, and conversions. I was sort of torn between marketing and finance and really wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go. And when I graduated in 2002, for those of you that are old enough to remember, that was when the tech bubble burst. And I had had an internship in marketing at IBM during school. And when I graduated in May of 2022 or 2002, the only offer to be found was in marketing at IBM. It was a very tough time to find a job. It was the only offer that I got, which actually simplified my decision between finance and marketing. Sort of was made for me. But in hindsight, I'm really fortunate that it happened that way, because I have found that marketing as a discipline encompasses so many different things, from the very creative, brand, even down to palette and colors and things like that, all the way through real hardcore data analysis to make better decisions. And I feel like I'm better suited to that type of environment than I would have been, in FP&A, or definitely not accounting. My balance sheet never balanced, which meant marketing was probably the better route for me anyway. But it was sort of serendipitous that it was somewhat made for me, but it was definitely lucky that it happened that way. As growing up in IBM, it was a very, very standard, normal, typical marketing communications role, very creative, very campaign programs. Fortunately, working for IBM, maybe one of the top 5 world's most recognizable brands, as a marketer, I got a free pass. I could do anything and people would open it. They would open the email, they would open the letter, because it came from IBM, instant credibility. And so we didn't really need to do a ton of data work. We would just be able to spray a bunch of messages out there and people would engage with them because it came from IBM. And about a decade ago, I had bounced around a couple of places. I was in the agency world for a while, and then I was in commercial satellite imagery for a while. But ultimately, I landed at a company called Esri, which was ArcGIS, so mapping software. And that company was in the midst of somewhat transforming themselves, reinventing themselves from a data perspective. And I was very fortunate to work with some very talented people at the time from a marketing technology perspective and from a process perspective, where we built from scratch a very robust data-driven marketing engine that literally reinvented how marketing was perceived within the company. And we made better decisions. We adopted what I now call a test and invest strategy, which is, rather than spending 6 months building a ginormous campaign, pushing the launch button and crossing your fingers that it's all going to work, develop 4 or 5 different mini campaigns with different variables, send it to a small percentage of your audience, figure out which one is actually engaging at the highest conversion rates with your audience, and then reinvest or just invest the rest of the budget money behind the one that's working. And fast forward now for about 10 years, where I'm at right now with HG Insights, and just using our own data, we've seen a lift of about 500% on our marketing return by focusing on those organizations with the highest propensity to buy a solution from us based upon a successful examination of successful engagements in our past. And then engaging things like intent, technographic intelligence, and these key criteria that suggest a company is ripe and ready to use data to improve their operations. And like I say, a 500% increase in the return on our marketing investment. When I started to get those initial results back, I didn't believe them. I actually went back to the team and I said, you guys, we need to dig into this, because these numbers are quite literally unbelievable. And I'm not taking this up the chain to say that we got a 5x improvement. Turns out we did. We double checked again and again, and the data is there, and it supports the fact that we are driving this kind of increase in our returns from a marketing perspective by embracing data. I will never go back. I had the good fortune to meet with the CMO of Adobe one-on-one for a period of time a couple of years ago. And I should really memorize her name because this was an important meeting in my life. I forget what her name was, but I'll go back and figure that out. But I asked her, I said, look, if you've looked at the Adobe stock price, it's basically one of the world's greatest success stories over the last 10, 15 years. And I said to her, like, when you go into the boardroom every quarter and they ask you, did we have a good quarter? And you say yes, and they say, how do you know? I'm like, what's your answer? Like, what do you measure at Adobe that suggests that things are going well? And she says, it's the simplest three things. It's impressions, engagement, and conversions. And she's like, those are not just about digital advertising, right? You can apply that same model to any marketing tactic out there. Impressions is, are you getting in front of the right people through a preferred channel that meets them on their own self-directed journey, right? So some people are very excited that in-person events are coming back. And so are you getting in front of the right people on the show floor? Are you doing it from your digital media? Are you doing it from your email marketing? Are you doing it through LinkedIn and your social, and TikTok and all those things? So are you getting in front of the right people? Do you have a compelling message? And so what that means, are they engaging with it? Are they clicking on it? Are they striking up a conversation? Are they watching your videos? Are they coming to your website? Are they engaging with the content because it was compelling enough to pique their interest, right? You haven't sold them anything yet, but you have started the very important process of convincing them that the status quo is no longer okay, right? Something has to change. It may not be with you, but the status quo is too expensive to keep going down that road. And then the final one is conversions. Are you getting them to trade something of value? From a marketing perspective, typically that's their contact information. Get them to raise their hand and say, I would like to learn more about what you are saying, right? And if you are doing a good job on impressions, engagement, and conversion, she said the rest of it takes care of itself, right? So your conversion rates down your funnel are going to be high because you've got the right people engaging with the right content and are converting because you've convinced them that they need to do something. So your conversion from lead to marketing qualified lead to sales accepted lead to opportunity to close one should take care of itself because you're getting the right type of contact up front in the top of the funnel. And then you can also apply that in the microcosm post-opportunity creation, right? So in the negotiation phase, can you provide an ROI calculator, for example, so your AEs don't have to discount as much? Can you do customer references of the customer use cases or case studies at the discovery phase, right? Oh, I had no idea Oracle was using this company like that. I'd like to do that too. So there's a lot of things that you can do as a marketer using that model of impression, engagement, and conversion. I am a fan, if you can afford it, of the Adobe Creative Suite. That not just the Photoshop and InDesign, things like that, but the CDP and the whole 9 yards. If you can afford it, it's really good because it allows for a lot of scalability. You used to have to hire an army of people to be a successful marketing organization at scale. You just don't anymore. The tools are pretty amazing. But I mean, at its core, there are three things that you really need. You need a marketing automation platform, you need a CRM, and you need not a crazy sophisticated, but an adequately sophisticated underlying of your website. I always forget this acronym. A WordPress or something like that. So you've got those three systems, and you can make a lot of hay if you have a talented campaign/program manager, if you have a talented web dev person, and you have an ability to have quality content created, whether that's internal or you outsource that to an agency from a designer or writer perspective. And then very, very importantly, you need a analytics metrics person. And so the models, the machines that I build typically have a Pardot or a Marketo as our marketing automation platform. Everywhere I've worked has been Salesforce, which is pretty common. And then the WordPress site is good enough. But the important component of that is building a visualization suite on top of that. And so we use Tableau here, but Power BI, any visualization, Looker, any of that stuff can work. The trick is getting the data out of the individual systems. And that's really where you need to invest in the right person who has the skills to bring data from Salesforce, from Marketo, from all these other systems into a Tableau so that you can actually visualize what's happening on the ground. And so we've had a lot of success using that model in building literally real-time dashboards. So every night when Marketo syncs with Salesforce at HG, it updates based on pulling campaign objects and other objects out of Salesforce, linking that together with the Marketo piece, and then it does show us the target, the impressions, engagement, conversion metrics in real time. So every morning I wake up and the dashboard is slightly different, and I can see how we're performing across those lines. But for those of us who have been at it for a while, we all know that you can get a Salesforce report to tell you anything that you want. The real challenge is getting it to tell you the same thing as it told that other person over there, because there are so many filters and there's typically a lot of confusion and fog between how people are pulling the data. And the Salesforce reporting suite, to me, has been deficient for a long time, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And so that's why I've used these third-party visualizations. But that brings its own brain damage in that you have to get the data out of Salesforce, which is not intuitively easy or accessible right out of the chute. You have to put some energy into that. So those are the tools, right? And if you have 4 or 5 people and you have those tools, that can take you to 100 million in revenue. Of organizations as we move through time, right? So those organizations that were quick to the marketing automation and things like that started to overperform or outperform their peer set, which explains why there are now over 9,000 vendors in the MarTech space, right? Everybody has a great idea and everybody seems to have found some money to start a company to address using technology in the space, whether it's data or features, functions, things like that. It's really crowded. There's a lot of people trying to help with this process. And there are organizations out there that are further along the adoption of that than others. And, just from my own personal journey, what we did at Esri and here what we've proven at HG, if I'm getting a 5x improvement in my ROI from a marketing perspective, and my competitors aren't, I'm taking share. Right? So there's going to be a Darwinian effect there that those people that are embracing data, that are making these better decisions based upon objective insights, real data, facts, they will outperform, and over time will create separation. And then ultimately those companies that aren't embracing that will have a very difficult time making a go of it. Right? And so those 9,000 vendors, there will always be more jumping into the space, but there's a long tail of those that are falling out because they have not yet improved or embraced the perspective of data. So I've actually thought about this a lot. 10 years ago, I fell into the opportunity at Esri to really learn how to do this stuff. I didn't sit at my desk at my previous job and say, this is where I see the market going. These are the boxes I need to check in my career so that I'm prepared for how this is going to go. Wasn't that smart. Very lucky in where I landed and what I was able to do with some talented people along the way. And as I view it, and I'm biased, of course, because I live in the marketing world, I think we're going to start to see more CEOs come from marketing, and we're going to see more CMOs have a greater share of influence at their organizations, because finally, marketing at the table is using data. So a decade ago, FP&A, finance, they had spreadsheets galore, right? Operations had been using ERP for years. And they could say, look, if we look around and we find $1 million laying in the couch, we should invest in additional manufacturing capacity in Gary, Indiana, because here's the business case and here's their ROI and here's what we're going to do. And then they look at the marketing person and around the table and they'd say, what would you do with $1 million? And he or she would say, I'd spend a lot and it's going to be big. we're gonna kill it. We're gonna drive all kinds of revenue, and it's gonna be so awesome. It's gonna be great. And they're gonna be like, prove it. And then the response was, you can't. I mean, and oftentimes they couldn't even prove what they were doing today, let alone what they would do with the next $1 million. That's not the case anymore. I've had the good fortune to work at organizations where we knew that investment of an additional $100,000 into the machine would yield $1.2 million 5.7 months later. So when the operations person's at that table saying Gary, Indiana, and I'm saying $1.2 million for every $100,000 you invest, I may not win that conversation, but I have a fighting chance for the first time in my career. And so, data isn't going away. Data is becoming more and more important every single day. And the advice that I give to my team and my colleagues and my network, things like that, is if you're not getting familiar with it and you're not getting good at it, you're getting left behind. And there will always be a need for brand and creative, and all of those things are still very important. But even those things can be measured, their impact on organizational value. And if you're not doing it, you're going to be stuck at that old model where you're saying, you're just going to have to trust me, this is going to be huge, and you won't be able to prove it. So my advice to anybody who might be listening to this, get comfy with the data because it is the future, man. It's already here.